Do Cape Breton University students really live in Halifax and commute weekly to CBU due to a lack of housing and jobs? And they actually drive almost 800 kilometers every week just to get to class?
A lot of students coming to Cape Breton University have little confusion about how come students are living or are able to live in Halifax and still get along with their school and college.
Hi, I'm Joe Ward of Boxer Shorts Media, and I don't have the data to tell you how many students are doing it, but there are at least some. And to be clear, when I first heard about it, I wasn't sure if it was just a bunch of BS along the lines of an emerging urban legend. That's how completely absurd it sounded to me. But there's enough confirmation now to declare it the real deal. The Cape Breton Post ran a story back in October talking about a student and a mom who jammed her classes into a 2-day schedule. She would leave at around 3 a.m. on the day of her classes, departing from Halifax to arrive on time in Sydney. And when she's back in Halifax, much of her time is spent working just to afford gas to travel back to CBU, as well as overnight accommodations while there for just 2 days of in-class study. The Cape Breton Post article at the time suggested that the university dodged an actual interview request, but relayed via a spokesperson that they discourage students from doing it. You think? Now, do you want to know one way to discourage students from doing it? Make sure you don't enroll thousands too many with insufficient housing, insufficient jobs, and other infrastructure, including classroom space, to provide them with the educational experience they're paying for right here in the CBRM. Now, I'll come back again to the topic of CBU's role in creating the housing crisis and the harsh conditions that affect more than just their students, but also severely impacts local residents at lower income levels. Subscribe to see what's coming next. For now, I'm curious how widespread the crazy practice of living in Halifax and commuting to school in Sydney actually is. How many are stuck in that terrible scenario? Now, I suppose the local culture of our Western workers commuting back and forth might make the idea seem a bit more familiar. They make an incredible sacrifice and are a big part of why we can keep this place afloat at all, economically speaking. They could pack up and leave the CBRM permanently anytime they choose, even if only at a work camp. At least when they arrive for work, there's actual accommodations ready for them. Now, if their company asks them to skid along an icy Highway 104 or 105 in a 2008 Honda Civic with 235,000 kilometers on the engine every week so they can nod off in class at the local movie theaters and earn minimum wage as a part-time job, well, let's just say that the HR guy might look like he just stepped out of the ring after a Rizicki fight when that conversation was over. Now, thinking back from my student perspective, when I went to St. FX, I lived in a residence. And when I went to Dalhousie, I got an apartment that I shared with people I knew. The idea of living at home in the CBRM and then commuting to school in Halifax would have made folks think I was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs if I'd suggested it. So one obvious question keeps arising for me. If you're going to live in Halifax, why not enroll in one of the local universities there? Therein may lie a bigger story to zero in on a rainy day or a snowy day to come. I'll file that question away in a post-it note for the time being. Now, for students who carpool or drive their own vehicles, it's really only a matter of time before someone is hurt or killed in an accident. Wintry roads can be treacherous, especially when you're half asleep and not a professional driver, or you're new to the local weather patterns. I've been thinking about this for a while, but was inspired to record this episode after discovering a CBU international student who vlogs on YouTube as Vans Creations 4K. He provides a lot of great videos that explain studying at CBU and living in the CBRM, as well as other places he travels to in Canada or abroad. And he basically created a how-to video explaining how to manage to live in Halifax and study at CBU for other students who are actually considering doing it. As one might expect, it comes down to housing and employment availability, both of which can be difficult to find due to sudden and excessive student enrollment numbers at CBU. And I felt he placed a little more emphasis on the employment aspect. Now, in the video, he talks about various ways to travel, essentially just as you would imagine, via bus, shuttle, personal vehicle, or carpooling. But the only way to make this feasible is for students to jam their entire weekly schedule into as few days as possible.
My advice to you will be that try to register as many classes in one day or maximum 2 days.
And that allows them to be elsewhere for the rest of the week, and they can hold part-time employment while living in Halifax while still managing to attend at least some classes. Now, I have some concerns about the quality of the education that results given this scenario. Can you imagine a great course in your degree program that falls outside of your 2-day jam schedule and you don't take it solely because you won't be in Sydney to attend the class? And just think of all that wasted driving time that could be spent reading or studying or even working. I also wonder how often students simply don't bother traveling to attend classes at all or do so infrequently. From my university experience, beyond some lab sessions, the only time attendance is going to be formally recorded is when you have to appear for an in-person quiz or an exam or perhaps a presentation. The rest of the time, especially in large classes, you can slip through the cracks. And can anyone really imagine CBU's classes not being jam-packed given the thousands of students enrolled? Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I highly doubt it. The spillover into the local theaters is a strong indication. If you don't have anywhere else to put people and thousands more enroll, class sizes must trend upwards. Now, people overuse the term crisis. I get it, and I actively think about it when I'm using the term, as I frequently do. As humans, we're prone to exaggerate when speaking informally about pretty much anything, but especially about political and economic topics. But in a world where there are how-to videos explaining how to live in Halifax and commute to CBU for classes, in a world where this actually exists on top of everything else we know about the housing issues, how could we not describe this as a crisis? And although I think the idea is absurd, I fully commend the students who are actually able to pull this off. Imagine that kind of tenacity. They're the type of people who will always be successful because there's not much you can put in their way that will stop them. It's kind of like thinking a stunt rider is crazy for jumping 10 buses on a dirt bike, but still thinking it's awesome when they land without cracking their skull. In other words, recognizing their tenacity doesn't mean that it's suddenly safe, and it doesn't mean it should be viewed as an acceptable part of our university culture for CBU, either as a formally acknowledged one or an understood but unacknowledged part. While I love solution-oriented critiques, there's really not much to do here other than reduce student numbers significantly until such time as housing capacity and the part-time job market is more accommodating. The only way it stops is when there's no longer an actual advantage to doing so. I mean, there's no other easy solution beyond sabotaging the practice of schedule jamming by simply disallowing it. If students can more readily find a place to live and can find some part-time employment while studying, there's certainly no reason for them to take the risk of driving back and forth from Halifax just to attend classes, especially in these coming winter months. In my moderately inconsequential view, housing for the CBRM in particular is now the top political issue and need, and it rises above healthcare. And maybe not forever, but for now. And I might have to defend that statement in a future episode, but don't think for a second that an inability to find housing or collapsing under the financial pressure of trying to keep what you have isn't a healthcare issue itself, because it is. If I were mayor, suffices to say, I'd be regearing the lion's share of advocacy directed at the province, the feds, and CBU towards that objective. Don't worry, if you know me as the guy who keeps talking about tax solutions, I assure you, tax solutions are fundamental to the housing solution too. And I've said that for a long time. For now, all I can do is confirm that there are actually students living in Halifax and studying at CBU. And it's not BS, and it's not the beginnings of an urban legend. It's just an unfortunate reality. To make sure you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes, subscribe now to Boxer Shorts Media via your choice of YouTube or Facebook.
Please hang up and try again.